founder and CEO of SpiceBox, a vegan curry house in London. Grace, thank you so much for joining us today and for speaking to our society members. We're really looking forward to this conversation. So can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what SpiceBox's mission is?
So our mission is simply to help create a healthier future for the planet and its population by inspiring people to eat more vegetables.
We'll move on to discussing kind of your personal journey to get to where you are today. When did you decide that you wanted to go into the food industry, and what compelled you to go down the avenue of vegan food in particular?
So in terms of going into the food industry, I'd always grown up being obsessed by food and cooking. I remember being like a 12-year-old and cooking meals for my parents and all of their friends, and I'd cook for anyone who'd eat my food. So that was always a real strong passion of mine, and I think a dream for me was always to kind of maybe have a TV cook show or write a recipe book one day. I grew up in the golden era of TV cookery shows, so the likes of Ready Steady Cook, the original Master Chef, Nigella James, all of those, I was obsessed with them. So that was kind of that really kind of began my passion for food. And then I actually I went to university. I didn't do a load of cooking at university. I still maintained an interest, but kind of lost touch of it a bit. But did quite a bit of traveling towards the end of my time at university, and got kind of re-inspired by cooking through traveling, I think. And then it wasn't until I actually was living and working in California. I used to work in tech, and I kind of fell in love with the Californian food scene and actually became vegan when I was living in California.
Nice.
And I think as a result of me kind of losing a bit of interest and faith in the tech world, I really kind of channeled a lot of energy into kind of cooking again, picking up that passion and traveling around California and eating in amazing restaurants. And I just was so kind of taken by the energy and the passion of the Californian food scene at that time. I thought, I really want to do something like this in London. And that kind of began the process of SpiceBox, really.
That's incredible. And I'm sure that's really inspiring for those who are listening as well, to hear kind of your humble beginnings and how you've shown that tenacity to keep pursuing what it is that you love, and to come back to food as well. Can you tell us some more about your time in Silicon Valley, and when did you realize that tech maybe isn't the avenue for you?
So to give you some kind of context, I left university, and literally on the day that I got my university results, I met a friend of a friend who said he had an idea for a media tech startup, and it was an audio news app, and always knew that I wanted to do my own thing and probably start my own business, and didn't have any job lined up for after uni, so thought I might as well give it a go. First into setting up a tech business straight out of uni, and did that for about 3 years and learned a lot, really enjoyed it. It was a really exciting time to be in the tech space in London. It was like right at the start of that kind of wave of tech startups. It was an exciting time to be in media as well, especially in our space, which was kind of the millennial news space. Yeah, and I kind of had to learn on the job, which was incredibly hard work and a bit daunting for a 24-year-old with no idea what they're doing. But I learned super quickly, and it was a great experience. And part of that experience was me getting accepted onto a tech startup accelerator in Silicon Valley. So I decided I'd go. So left London, put the business in London on hold a bit, moved to Silicon Valley to kind of tweak the business and take it in a direction that was more scalable, because obviously in America they're obsessed with scale, and we couldn't get away with having a whole team of journalists and paying them to create content, etc. We had to kind of focus on how we'd scale the idea. But as a result of that, the business kind of lost its kind of true essence and what I really cared about, which was engaging young people with important information. And so kind of in the effort to make it scalable, it kind of lost its magic for me a bit. And then that was kind of one part of Silicon Valley that didn't gel with me. That, you know, the absolute stress on scalability, you know, the risk of losing everything else that's good about a business. And then also, I mean, it's a really interesting place, and it's full of geniuses, but it's also full of a lot of hot air and pretty rubbish ideas. And I was kind of just really struck by how all these people were raising stupid amounts of money for things that I just didn't think had a purpose or the world really needed, to be frank.
Right.
So it was a combination of me losing passion and interest in the business that I was working on, and also just not really gelling with the kind of the vibe in general in Silicon Valley. And that kind of, made me become a bit disillusioned with the world.
Right. Well, that's a really interesting journey to have heard about, and I'm sure that a lot of people who are listening will find that kind of advice really practical. Kind of stay true to why you start pursuing things and going into the career that you go into. Now we will move on to discussing SpiceBox in some more detail. So can you tell us about your experience with running stores at festivals, and how did this kind of allow you to reach your target market?
So I actually never intended to go into street food at all. I thought I'd move back to London, start this business, test the concept a bit, and then raise money and open a restaurant straight away. And sadly, that wasn't the truth. I mean, the UK investment space is slightly more risk averse than the US one, and especially around kind of hospitality and kind of analog businesses, so to speak. And it's still the case, actually. So it became quite apparent that I'd have to really prove my concept before I could even think about raising money. So I started just cooking at home, in my home kitchen. I turned my house into an Indian takeaway. My neighbors would come and get food from me by night, and I'd be cooking by day. You know, there was only such a level I could get to at that stage. And street food in London was really up at the time. It was a really exciting kind of scene that was exploding. And, you know, I looked at what was happening and thought it would probably be pretty good for marketing and branding if I could kind of become part of that. So I applied to quite a few markets, and one finally took me on board. And I had a stall every Saturday. In the midst of winter, it was freezing and back-breaking work, to be honest. But through that, I got introduced to one of the kind of main street food collectives in London called Curb, and they said they were looking for a trader that was doing vegan food and also Indian food. So it was great timing, and invited me to become part of them. So that kind of began the street food part of the business. And yeah, it was an incredible time. Like, it's really, really hard work, especially if you don't have like a business partner you're doing it with. But it's such a good opportunity to test a product, test the market, get instant feedback. You're super kind of agile. You can change your menu from one day to the next. You can put new dishes on the menu. You can even change your branding like every other week. And just, it's such a good basis to start a food business. And I also learned a lot about running a food business and kind of cooking at scale. So even though I didn't intend to do it and it was incredibly hard work, I'm really glad I got that experience, because it was definitely part of what got me to where I am now.
Amazing. That sounds like quite the journey, starting from your doorstep, literally. As a brand, SpiceBox clearly has a number of unique elements which make it completely different to any other curry house that we know of. How important is your branding and are your marketing efforts in making this core competency clear to your end consumers?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I always knew starting a food brand that branding was really important. I think in any startup business, I think brand, look and feel is what I mean really by brand, and tone of voice is incredibly important. But something, especially in the food world, that's key. But I want to caveat that by saying that your product has to come first. So the most important thing is that your product is amazing, and people crave it and come back for it and dream of it, and it's just so much better than everything else in the market. Once you've nailed that, then the branding comes in. Obviously, marketing is a really broad term, and there's so many kind of angles to it. But in terms of like classic I mean, digital marketing and physical marketing, we actually haven't done a huge amount. And that's mainly because street food gives you a really good start to kind of getting the word out there and letting people know about your brand, because you're at festivals feeding like thousands of people, and you're kind of part of these London markets a lot of people go through, and off the back of that you get really great PR. So I'd say if there's one kind of traditional marketing route that we've leveraged, it would mainly be PR, and that was definitely the case for opening the restaurant. It's the only paid marketing we've done, really. Paid, like we paid an agency to help us with PR, but we got a lot of organic PR as well. And then in terms of like, we don't do any digital marketing right now. And I actually don't think for a restaurant brand it's necessary at all, because you've got your shop front and your shop window, and that's the most important thing. So I would say if you're interested in going into the restaurant world or the food business, it's all about, shop front. PR is really helpful, and then the most important thing is Google and Google reviews, and that's all organic generated marketing. If you've got a great product, great service, people are going to write nice things about you, and that's the most thing you can have.
And the next question is something that, of course, I have to ask in this current situation we're in, with everything going on in the world right now. We're in a second lockdown in the UK. I just wanted to know, how has COVID-19 affected SpiceBox, and how have you had to adapt your offering as a brand?
So we were incredibly fortunate during COVID, because it's been it's had a real devastating effect on the hospitality industry. Two things really helped us, and the first one was that we were in a neighbourhood location in London. So our first curry house, Walthamstow, which is a place where people live rather than work. So during lockdown, there were a lot of people in Walthamstow, more than there probably ever have been. Everyone was going into work every day, so that was really good. And also, pretty much every restaurant in Walthamstow, apart from one other, closed for lockdown. So we had the real bit of the kind of Walthamstow market. And then the second advantage we had is that we sell a product that travels incredibly well, and people naturally associate with takeaway and delivery, which is curry. And we already were doing quite a lot of sales through takeaway before COVID. So we actually had a very busy period during the first lockdown, and that is continuing throughout this lockdown too. So, we didn't have to close. We kept most of our team employed, and we saw some really great sales. So I can't complain.
Amazing.
One thing we did have to do is start delivery. We never used to do delivery. We only did takeaway and dine in. And I'd kind of always said that I wouldn't ever do delivery, because I never wanted to work with like delivery or Uber Eats.
Yeah.
But into a corner there, and the market's changed, and we've got no choice. So we're currently still working with third-party delivery partners, as well as doing it in-house.
Just hearing that you've had to adapt in some ways, at least, and that you've still managed to come out so strong as a brand, and even stronger through the lockdown, is quite inspirational. Now let's talk about the future of SpiceBox. What can we expect from the SpiceBox brand in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
So we're definitely planning on opening more curry houses, hopefully lots more. And hopefully, there'll be some news on that soon. We're also working on a retail range, which actually the COVID really accelerated our work on that, because we realised how important it was as a kind of traditional hospitality business to really diversify on our sales channels. And retail was always a plan, and we just kind of brought that forward. And then we've also got a kind of what we call a media arm. So we've started doing some YouTube content, and we really hope to kind of build that out in the future as well. And that's kind of all about educating people about how to kind of cook with spices and cook more plant-based food. So across all kind of aspects of the business, we've got lots of plans, and I think that 2021 is going to be a pretty busy year for us.
I must say, I've definitely saved a couple of those YouTube videos in my recipes folder. So let's move on to sustainability, which is a major contributor of how SpiceBox does operate. Why is sustainability, in your eyes, an important factor for SpiceBox as a brand, and what can you say about the food industry in general?
Predominantly, the reason why I started SpiceBox is because I wanted to do something in the kind of vegan food space, and that was mainly out of me kind of wanting to help create positive change when it came to climate change and the environment. For me, I think one of the single biggest things that we can do as kind of members of the general public and consumers is tweak our food habits. And when I say tweak, I don't mean that everyone has to go vegan. I just think if everyone made a bit more of a conscious effort to kind of cut down on their dairy and meat consumption, then the world would be in a better place. And it's, to me, it's like the easiest step to take because it can be such like a joyous thing. Vegan plant-based food can taste absolutely delicious, and that's what I really want to show people. So sustainability, you know, I thought, okay, I want to do something in the space because I really care about it. And you know, a lot of other things came together. I'd always had an interest in India and Indian food, and grew up cooking Indian food and traveling around India. So that kind of really came together with the vegan thing for SpiceBox. Sustainability is kind of essential to what we do and why we do it. The food industry in general, I think, yeah, I mean, like absolute systemic reform is needed pretty quickly. There's a lot of, you know, amazing people doing amazing things in terms of like lobbying the government and trying to change the food industry for the better. But I think that the real change will come if consumer habits change and we're demanding more from big food companies. You know, we may only be kind of a little curry house at the moment, but my dream is to create a really big brand that has a lot of influence over the general public and can help educate and create positive change. And you know, the only way to do that is by cooking delicious food that people love, that also happens to be slightly lighter on the environment.
I personally love the reasons that you do what you do, and it's for positive change, and everyone can take steps every day, and that's something that consumers need to be reminded. It is our changes that will impact companies and will impact governments to make bigger changes in the future. And that's something, as you say, should be more of a requirement across the industry to factor in sustainability where it's possible. What are some of the specific practices that SpiceBox implements to make sure that it does operate sustainably?
The obvious thing it starts with is the fact that our menu is 100% vegan. Which, you know, is already a kind of 70% saving on carbon compared to kind of a normal menu. But beyond that, our curry house is powered entirely on green energy. We have a really great relationship with a recycling company called First Mile, and they help us recycle as much as possible on the site. Currently, that's about 75% of all our waste, and then the rest is burnt to create electricity. So we kind of have a zero to landfill policy on that front. On the menu, we try and use organic products where possible. I'm really passionate about farming, but it's just not, right now, it's not viable for us to make our whole menu organic because it just wouldn't be affordable to most people. We also have a reusable takeaway tiffin scheme, which is essentially our guests can come and get a takeaway and purchase a stainless steel tiffin off us. A tiffin is like an Indian stacked lunchbox, and it's very good for kind of keeping curries secure and hot. And yeah, they can swap those out and we refill them, and just stops them having to use single-use packaging. So that's really great. Sustainability also, you know, it's not just about recycling and reusable packaging. It's also about like your policy with your team and how you treat your customers and the impact you have on your community and all of that. And I mean, you know, I've got endless aspirations for us as a brand in that regard, and we can always do better. And I think it's just about every time that we grow and, you know, we have important decisions to make, that we always put kind of sustainability and doing the right thing at the front. But the flip side of that is, just as important as that is us creating a sustainable business that's sustainable kind of financially. And I think at the beginning of SpiceBox, I kind of got quite carried away with trying to do the best thing possible and maybe making some bad business decisions on the way. And one thing I have learned is that you've got to lay really strong foundations first and build a really solid business and a model that works and is scalable, and then start addressing the sustainability side of things, because it's not going to make a change if it doesn't exist in 3 years.
No, that's something that's really important to bear in mind. What are the 3 biggest lessons that you've learned throughout your entrepreneurial journey?
One really important thing that I wish I'd kind of learnt sooner was it's okay to not know the answer to things. And I think one of the best things that you can be as an entrepreneur is quite kind of humble and willing to ask for help and admit when you don't know something. And then also kind of in relation to that, I think it's also really important to admit when you're wrong about something and when you've messed up, because you're always, I mean, especially if you're like me and you don't have like domain expertise in what you're doing. For example, I'd never really worked in a restaurant before I started it. You've always got to be learning, and you've got to bring people on board that know way more than you. And if you're kind of taking the stance that you know everything and it's your way or the highway, then you're going to piss off the people you're working with, and you're not really going to learn, and therefore you're not going to progress. And then kind of on the other side, it's also you need to know when to stick to your guns on something and when you kind of have a gut instinct on something, and you should know when, you know, to really listen to that, because that's what makes the kind of your brand that you're building, your business you're building, like uniquely yours, and it's what you bring to it. So it's this really kind of careful, delicate dance between being really humble and open and like listening and learning, but also standing firm on the things that you really believe in. It's quite a challenging thing to navigate, and sometimes, you know, I can get it wrong. I can be too kind of listening to other people and not really sticking with my own guns on stuff, or I can be kind of too blinkered and stubborn on some things. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of the most important things. Another thing is don't underestimate how important it is to look after yourself in terms of like your body and your mind, because it's a really extreme, intense career path, and it's really hard. Like, especially hospitality is physical and mentally, it's really hard as well. So keep those two things in check, and yeah, you can face pretty much anything.
That's honestly so inspiring to hear. And I think we'll move on to our final question. What did you study at university, and how has your experience at university helped you in your career?
So I studied English literature at university, which is not really anything to do with my line of work at the moment. But it actually did. My English degree really helped in my first startup that I did, which was a media, like journalism based startup. So I applied quite a lot of the kind of analytical and editing and writing skills to that. So my experience at university, again, my first startup, I did a lot of student radio, and my first startup was an audio news company. So that was quite relevant. In terms of my experience at university helping with SpiceBox, I think that, I mean, the way I approached, I really nearly didn't go to university, and because I wanted to just move to London and kind of start my own thing and do my own thing from scratch, from like the age of 18. And when I did go to university, I kind of said to myself that I'd go and like treat it like a job and work as hard as I could. That kind of really solidified my work ethic, and kind of showed me what was possible if I really applied myself. Because at the end of the day, if you work really hard at something, it's quite hard not to succeed. I think that it was that kind of experience, like doing finals and that kind of relentless studying, is quite applicable to starting a business.
We do actually have one more question. How do you balance your time, and do you have any daily practices, routines to manage stress?
I mean, first answer to this is I kind of didn't used to, and I got to the point where I just was super burnt out and kind of considered giving up, because I just couldn't cope with the kind of emotional roller coaster. And then I invested a lot of time in trying to undo that, which I'll come on to. But I am really fortunate I'm able to balance my time a lot more now, because I have an incredible team that I work with, and namely I run the business with a guy called Alpesh, shout out Alpesh. And, you know, being able to kind of share the load with someone else makes a huge difference. And he's super understanding that I need kind of time to myself and kind of recharge and reset. I also give myself a lot of time and space in the morning. So I get up pretty early. I'm getting up about 5:30 at the moment, but I used to get up about 4:30.
Wow. Dedication.
Those hours in the morning when I'm not working and I'm just really focusing on myself are key. In terms of daily practices, I meditate twice a day. Meditation completely changed my life and definitely my work life. It helps so much. I practice yoga. I try and eat well. I exercise pretty much every day, and I'm currently living by the sea, so I go swimming in the sea every morning.
Wow, that's incredible.
So yeah, that's kind of it's routine is very important to me, and it's how I get the most out of myself and for the business as well. It's how I'm the most productive. And then it's also just super important to remember like how important your family and your friends are, and carving out time to see them. And if you love what you do and your job is exciting and it's moving, and even if it's like going really badly and it's all consuming, like it's so easy to get sucked into it and like lose kind of connection with the world around you. And I'm definitely at risk of doing that. So I have to really make an effort to kind of step out of that world and make sure that I spend time with my friends and family, because that's absolute nourishment for your soul.
Thank you very much, Grace, and wish you the best of luck in your journey through SpiceBox.
Can I just say, can you all make sure you follow at Eat SpiceBox on Instagram? Keep up with us there. And we've also got a YouTube channel, SpiceBox TV, where you can check out all of our recipe videos.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you.
Bye.